Hello everyone, my name is Preston Dennett, and welcome to another episode of UFOs and the Paranormal. I have something a little different for you today. Today I'm going to be talking about my own experiences, specifically my own experiences with astral travel and out-of-body exploring. So today's episode is called Out-of-Body Exploring, My Own Experiences. This is something that's very dear to me. Something I've really worked hard to do. I've talked about this quite a bit on various radio shows and podcasts, but this is the first video I've put together. A number of you have requested that I do this, so I am just going to go ahead and do it. So before I get into the actual experiences, let me give you a little bit of background about how this all rolled out for me. As you may know, I started out a complete skeptic in UFOs and anything paranormal, and how it began was really on October 13th, 1984. I received a phone call that my mother had passed away of a massive heart attack at age 49. This was, of course, as you can imagine, devastating, and it was then that strange things began to happen to me. It's just a few weeks later, at the service for my mother, that I saw her spirit, her ghost. I did not think that's what was happening when it occurred. I saw her appear as a full-color apparition in front of me, and I thought to myself, wow, I must be delirious with grief. I am seeing things. I am losing my mind. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't think ghost or spirit. I just thought I was hallucinating due to grief. I now believe it probably was her spirit, and that's sort of the first thing that happened. And it wasn't long after that, throughout 1985 and 86, and even into 1987, I began having very vivid dreams. I've never really been a big dreamer, but I started having dreams where my mother would come into my bedroom. I would wake up and look at her in complete shock and say, "What are you doing here? You're dead." And she would smile at me and sort of telepathically let me know that no, she was just fine, that everything was all right. And this happened over and over again, more than a dozen times for sure. And I found it really quite confusing because I knew on some level that this was her. It was the same every time. She'd walk in, I'd wake up, I'd be completely shocked, and she would just kind of look at me and smile. And then I would wake up for real. So this was sort of a false awakening. I didn't realize it at the time, but this was probably a lucid dream or a pre-lucid dream. At any rate, I really felt like this was her. I mean, I could just tell by the quality of her presence. But on the other hand, I didn't believe in life after death, so I was really conflicted. Both of these things could not be true. Either I was going crazy or she was really visiting me. So I wasn't quite sure how to handle this. And when it kept happening, I started to look for answers. I read books by Carlos Castaneda, by Jane Roberts. I read books about dreams, and I stumbled into the subject of lucid dreaming, and that's when I thought, okay, perhaps this is what's happening to me. I am having lucid dreams. So I started to read more and more books on dreams and tried to learn how to become lucid in the dream state, how to wake up while in the dream. And I did not find it easy. I kept trying, and I couldn't really do it. But events marched forward, and in 1986, I had another strange awakening. This was on November 17th, 1986. I was watching the news, and the newscasters came on, and there was a pilot, apparently, who had seen a UFO over Alaska. I didn't believe it for a second. I thought this pilot was lying. I thought he was crazy, deluded, misperceiving. But I remembered my brother had seen a UFO, and I kind of made the mistake of asking him what he thought of this pilot and what had he seen. And my brother Mark described an incredible UFO encounter. And I knew he wasn't lying, and it didn't sound like he was misperceiving. So I started asking more questions, found out a number of people within my family, my friends, my coworkers had seen UFOs, and it was clear to me that there was something going on here. So this was pretty much earth-shaking for me, really shattered my worldview. I had to reevaluate everything I thought I knew. UFOs were real, and it soon became clear that it was more than that, because a lot of the people I knew who they were not only seeing UFOs, but seeing aliens, having missing time. These were some major encounters, and some of them were describing ghost encounters as well. And I thought to myself, well, that happened to me. People I knew had described near-death experiences, precognition, dreams that come true, clairvoyance, telekinesis, levitation. I thought to myself, what's going on here? So I started reading more books and had a real big adjustment to my worldview. I started interviewing people. And this is when I found a book by Robert Monroe called Journeys Out of the Body. Robert Monroe is well known for out-of-body exploring. He's written 3 best-selling books on this subject. And this first book described his own experiences, and in the end of the book, it had exercises on how to do it. And I thought, okay, this sounds a little peculiar, a little bit scary, but I'm certainly willing to try it. It sounds very, very interesting. If a person can leave their body and explore the other side, which is what he said, perhaps I could find out if there was life after death firsthand. So I started doing these exercises. This is basically meditation, relaxation exercises, visualizations, affirmations, this sort of thing. I'll get more into this in a bit. And to my surprise, these exercises worked. I immediately started having a lot more dream recall, started having pre-lucid and lucid dreams. For example, one dream, I woke up to find myself on the kitchen floor. Somehow I'd fallen asleep on the kitchen floor and my head was stuck under the cabinet. And I pulled myself to a standing position, and I was very confused because I thought to myself, how the heck did I fall asleep on the kitchen floor? This makes no sense. And I was very tired, very disoriented, and I managed to stumble back into my bed. And as soon as I hit the bed, I woke up and realized that this was a dream. But I thought I was awake. So this is sort of a pre-lucid or lucid dream. And I continued to do the exercises that Robert Monroe outlined in his book. And it wasn't long before I had my first full-blown out-of-body experience. I remember it vividly. It was February 7th, 1988. It was during the day. I went to lay down in bed for just a few minutes. I was a little tired that day. And laid down on my stomach when suddenly my body felt really heavy. And I almost passed out, but I didn't. I was awake. But I felt these strong electrical feelings pulsing through my body, sort of a vibration. And Robert Monroe talks about this. He calls it the vibratory state, the vibrational state. And I knew instantly that that was what was happening to me. He said it would be like a mild electric shock. And I thought to myself, mild? I feel like I am being electrocuted. And for a little while there, I thought perhaps I'd stuck my finger into the electric socket next to my bed. And this went on for a good 30 seconds to a minute when suddenly there was a pronounced sort of pop, and I felt a swooping sensation, and I lifted up out of my body and went across my bedroom, through the hallway and into the bathroom. And I stood in front of the sink, grabbed the countertop, and looked into the mirror, and there was nothing there. And I became extremely excited, and I shouted to myself, I'm doing it! I'm doing it! I'm actually doing it! I was amazed, of course, and was only conscious for maybe a minute before I was pulled back into my bedroom, across the hallway and into my bedroom, sort of uncontrollably pulled back towards my body. I was shocked to see a short man standing next to my bed, and as I kind of floated by him, I grabbed him and spun him around by the shoulders and tried to look into his face to see who he was, and my vision blurred, and I got pulled horizontally over my body, and I plopped back into my body. I instantly woke up. I was so excited. I was so happy. I had actually done it. I mean, I could have levitated with glee. I was really excited. And I doubled down on the exercises, and it wasn't long before I had another experience. These would usually happen on weekends when I could sleep late. Sometimes happen spontaneously in the middle of the night. And these beginning ones were always very short. The second one was pretty much the same exact thing. I popped out of my body, flew across my bedroom, across the hallway and into the bathroom again, and was pulled back into my body. The third one was a little scary, actually. I woke up one night and found myself standing next to my bed, and I had a lot of vertigo. I was pretty disoriented, felt really dizzy, and finally I got my bearings and kind of fully woke up, and I looked down in bed, and I got a real shock. I was lying there under the covers, and at the same time I'm standing next to my bed. And I got a real cold chill, a feeling of dread swept over me, and I thought to myself, I've died. I am dead. I am a ghost. I was not happy. I was actually really frightened, and I immediately dived back into my body, felt a very peculiar sensation of filling up my body and kind of wiggling into place, and woke up. And I almost forgot what happened, but suddenly it popped back into my mind. And I smiled. I was really happy. I had done it again. So this was enough for me to become hooked, and I really started doing a lot of meditating and trying to do this over and over again. And I did. I started having regular out-of-body experiences. Often very early in the morning, I would feel the vibrations, or I would just suddenly pop out of my body, and I'd be floating in the middle of my room. And I would become so excited, so happy, I'd get immediately pulled back in. I mean, literally, these were 5-second out-of-body experiences. And finally, I learned to extend it to about 20 seconds, 30 seconds to a minute. This took several months. And then I had to learn how to move, how to see. Often my vision would be cloudy, and I had a hard time focusing. Everything looks a little different when you're out of body. But by practicing, I was able to do that. I had to learn how to move. Initially, I would try to flap my arms and wiggle my legs, and I would just kind of dangle there like a spider in the middle of my room. And it was really frustrating and confusing. And finally, I learned how to move was through a matter of willpower. You would just sort of focus on moving, and you would whoosh, move across the room. And that's what I did. This was pretty much the first year or two of my out-of-body experiences, was learning how to calm myself down emotionally, learn how to see, and learn how to move. And after I did that, this is when the fun really began. I started to explore the house. I would walk through my bedroom door, it's a very peculiar sensation, and explore the living room. And when you're out of body, everything's really beautiful. There's sort of a weird glow. Everything has a little bit of light coming off of it. And it's very peaceful. It's very hard to describe. It's very calm. It's kind of a lonely feeling too, because there was no one else out there. It was just me, as near as I could tell. I did not have a spirit guide that I saw, not like those first 2 times. I think that's perhaps what that man was. But at any rate, I sort of learned how to extend it to a minute, to 2 minutes, to 10 minutes, to upwards of an hour. And I became more courageous, got more courage to go outside. I would run through the back door, the glass sliding door, which is a weird sensation. I can tell you, you feel it throughout your whole body. It's kind of like diving into water, sort of. There's surface tension, and you pop out on the other side. It's really cool, actually. Sometimes I would just fly straight up through the ceiling and hover above the house, about 50 feet, 100 feet up, and start flying around. And I can tell you, flying is worth the price of admission to this. It is so much fun. So I spent a good year just doing loop-de-loops and flying around the house and sort of exploring the backyard. I did, of course, tell my family. I was trying to explain to them that UFOs were real, and some of them weren't happy about that because they did not believe, except for those who had seen it. And now I'm telling them that I'm going out of body. And several of my brothers and sisters, and I had a lot. I'm one of 6 kids, and my father. And I was telling them I'm having out-of-body experiences. And they were looking at me like I was crazy. And I'm like, no, for real. Honest to God, I am. And they just kind of shrugged and said, okay. That's nice. And I'm like, okay. I couldn't convince them. And my experiences continued. I started to explore the physical world more and more. I would kind of float down our road, our street there, down the driveway, fly around. Super beautiful. It was a lot of fun. And at one point I got the courage to go farther and do more and more stuff. For example, we have telephone wires near our house. I would always fly around them. But I had read other books on astral travel by this time. I was buying all the books. And several astral travelers said, you go ahead, fly right through them. You can't be hurt. You're out of body. You're not physical. Nothing can hurt you. And so I finally got the courage and I flew right through the telephone wires. It was a little scary, but there was a blast of light, a little buzzing feeling, buzzing noise, and I was out on the other side. Since then I've done it many times and I usually feel nothing. Sometimes I'll be flying to get out through the ceiling or the wall and I'll bounce right off of it. That's always a surprise. Sometimes you barely can squeeze through it and you almost get trapped. And sometimes you just slide right through it easily. It sort of depends, I think, on your level of awareness or the density of your astral body. So I did this sort of thing for quite a while. 1991, my first out-of-body experience, I was, 22 years old, pretty young man. I moved out of the house when I was 25 to a condominium complex in Canoga Park, and that's where I continued my explorations, mainly of the physical world. Sometimes I would call out for my mom and see if she would come, and she never did. But there were a few times where I popped out of body, and to my utter shock, there she was. And I would run up and hug her, and would be overjoyed to see her. She never really said much, at least I couldn't remember it. Sometimes she did talk, but I would forget what she said when I woke up. But what would often happen is I would see her and I would remember being with her on a nearly nightly basis. All these memories would come flooding back to me. It was really quite confusing because I felt like I was living in 2 worlds. It's hard to describe, but I would come back to my body and I would forget all of that memory. I would remember remembering, if that makes any sense. But the actual details would escape me until I got out of body again, and then all these memories would come flooding back. And I would think to myself, well, I must be mistaken. My mom's alive and this is where I live, until I would pop back in my physical body and I'd have to readjust again. So in the beginning, it was really quite confusing and somewhat dreamlike. And I started to wonder, perhaps these are dreams. Perhaps I am going crazy. I knew I wasn't because there was a lot of books on this, and what I was experiencing matched what other people were writing about. But when it happens to you, it is a little disconcerting. So I tried moving objects. I never could. I would fly over to my friends' houses, to other family members' homes, and try to get their attention. They could never see me. I was an absolute ghost. So it was really quite frustrating. I couldn't move objects. I couldn't get anyone's attention. But I vowed that I was going to get proof that this was real. And one day, I was out of body early one morning, and I'm flying around behind my condo, where there's sort of a cement river, the LA River, totally encased in cement. And I'm flying along it when I see this weird patch of soil on the ground. And I thought, well, this is a hallucination. This has got to be at least partly a projection or a dream, because the river is completely composed of cement. And what I was looking at was a huge patch of soil with grass growing on it. I saw 7-Up cans, some water bottles, and I thought, well, I know what I'm going to do. I know exactly where this is. It's not far from my house. I'm going to fly back into my body, and I'm going to go over here and check it out in real life. So that's what I did. I flew back into my body, and I woke up, wrote the experience down, got a strong cup of coffee, and vowed to drive over there. I could have walked, but it would have taken too long, so I took my car and drove over to this section of the LA River and climbed down to the edge and looked down and got a real shock. There it was, exactly as I had seen it in the out-of-body state. And I can tell you, that's a peculiar feeling, seeing something that you've first seen out of body in a location that you haven't seen before, and then looking at it physically. And yeah, I proved to myself that this was in fact real. So from that point I started doing more exploring of the physical world. I would fly over Canoga Park in Southern California. I'd fly over the freeways. I'd go thousands of feet up. It was scary sometimes because I thought, well, what if I fall? But kept reminding myself, I'm out of body. You can't be hurt. And I would fly farther and farther away. I flew all the way to a friend's house in San Diego. That was all kinds of fun. Normally when you're flying around, it's maybe 5 or 10, 20 miles per hour. But if you reach for a farther destination, something weird happens. You sort of teleport and boom, you're there. And I was at my friend's house and I tried to get his attention. I couldn't, so I just kind of flew around his neighborhood there, and I think it was Ocean Beach in San Diego. And I couldn't get anyone else's attention either. Once I was staying at his house, I flew all the way back to my condominium. So yes, you can travel far distances. And I did a lot of exploring of the physical world initially. One thing I read about from Robert Monroe was that he visited the moon. He and some of his friends, I guess, or the people he's taught how to do it, his students. And they said that there's nothing there but craters and dust. I wasn't so sure because, I'd been reading about UFOs and possible artifacts on the moon. So I just, that was on my bucket list for sure. And one evening I woke up spontaneously. I was already out of body. That's how it sometimes happens. And I was flying upwards around my condominium, and I looked up, and there was the moon. It was a full moon. And I said, oh, all right, let's go to the moon. And I did. I said, okay, take me to the moon. Let's go. And I sort of focused on it. And it was taking a long time. At this point, I could stay conscious maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes. And the rate I was going, I knew I would not make it there unless I sped up. So I really, really focused on getting there, and suddenly, zoom, I was it's going much faster. There was a shift, and suddenly I was there. It filled up my whole field of view, and I came in for a landing, and I stood on the moon. And I thought to myself, all right, this is amazing. I mean, I'm always thrilled whenever I make it out of body. It's truly exciting. And I thought to myself, well, no one's ever going to believe this. And I didn't tell anyone because it was just too wild. I mean, who would believe this? But there I was on the moon looking at the craters and the dust, and it was very gray with sort of tones of white and gray. And I'm flying around a little bit, just exploring, and looks pretty much just like, you would think the moon is. Not much there. Really beautiful, starkly beautiful. And then something caught my attention. There was a little sort of hill ahead of me. And to my surprise, a section of this hill had a little dome in it, sort of on the edge there. And it was perfectly smooth. I could instantly see this was artificial. It was made out of the same stuff, or apparently it looked like the same sort of moon rock stuff. But it was very obviously artificial. It was way too smooth. So I made a beeline for it and went right inside. And it was rather large and hollow. And there was a room inside, sort of longish. And there was a lot of laboratory equipment, a lot of highly technological equipment. There was rows of this equipment and tables. And my vision started to go in and out a little bit. But I came up to one of the tables, and I saw that there was a person lying on it. What looked like a young man, maybe a child. And I tried focusing on them, and I got a real shock because what I saw was not good. What I saw was it looked like there was some sort of genetic experiment going on, and that there was sort of like he was part animal, part human. So this did not make me happy. I became really upset, and I tried to destroy the place. Sometimes when you're out of body, you feel like you're opening doors or moving objects, but you're not. You're actually moving sort of the astral duplicate. Like I'll run to my front door and I'll open it, and then of course when you wake up the next morning, the door is not opened. So there's an astral duplicate of the physical world, is what I found out from reading and first-hand experimentation. So that's what I was doing. I started destroying what I could, and that eventually woke me up. So yeah, you can explore the physical world, and it's all kinds of fun. But at some point you do get drawn to the other side, because that is the astral body's natural habitat. In effect, you're not really astral projecting. You're projecting when you're in your physical body, because your real home is on the other side. That soon became clear to me. And the astral body is also called the desire body or the emotional body. And once you go out of your body, you'll find out why. Because your emotions are much stronger when you're out of body. There is no filters. And your emotions will hit you like a ton of bricks. Any emotion that you've suppressed, whether it's fear or anger or lust or the deadly sins, all of these, anything you've suppressed will come roaring out in full force. And I got over the fear barrier pretty quickly. I had a lot more trouble with being too excited, overly excited. But once I started popping over into the other side, emotions would get the better of me. And I had a lot of trouble with anger, with gluttony, and with lust. So I want to talk a little bit about lucid dreaming versus the out-of-body experience. There's a lot of discussion in this in the out-of-body literature. And some people think they are completely separate phenomena. Some think that they're related. Some think they're the same thing. I think they are essentially the same thing. Because when you are lucid dreaming, you are out of body. The only real difference is when you're lucid dreaming, you're perceiving the environment around you as being a mental projection, a hallucination. When you're out of body, you're perceiving what you would call the real world, or the astral equivalent of it. So essentially they are the same thing, but it's sort of a different state of awareness. I've had a number of lucid dreams where I've walked through a wall and popped out into an out-of-body experience. So you can project from the lucid dream into an out-of-body experience. And I've had out-of-body experiences where I fall back into a lucid dream. And there are some which are so similar it's difficult to tell the difference. But at any rate, what often happens is when you try to get to the other side, you will go into this area which Robert Monroe called Locale 2. And this is where thought rules. Thought rules the astral plane. What you think will appear in full color. So you have to be really careful with your thoughts and what you're thinking and what you're feeling, because it will manifest. And for me, my first real problem was anger. I'm not really an angry person. I didn't think I was, but definitely I had some issues with this apparently. And for me, how it would manifest was I would find myself in a grocery store. And this isn't unusual. This is something many astral travelers will tell you, that they find themselves inside grocery stores. For whatever reason, this is a thing. I think perhaps it's because grocery stores have a lot of life force in them with all the food. I don't know. It's very strange. And I would find myself in what I perceived to be the local market or the local supermarket. Sometimes it was a completely unknown grocery store. At any rate, I would go crazy and start throwing bottles, ripping open packages, breaking windows, tipping over shelves, clearing shelves of the items, and just basically destroying the place until I somehow got rid of my waves of anger. Not sure where they were coming from, but this is what I went through. And it was a real struggle for a good several months. And it wasn't only that. Another thing that would sweep over me was hunger. I would become insatiably hungry. I think this might be tied to past lives where I've starved to death, because past lives is a big thing, as we'll get to. But I would pop out of body, find myself in a grocery store, and I would start going for my favorite foods. Or I'd pop out, find myself on the other side, and I'd just manifest a table filled with my favorite foods, which were usually sour cream and onion, potato chips, brownies, chicken pieces, Neapolitan ice cream, these sort of things. And I would just gorge. I would rip open a carton of orange juice and drink the whole thing. I would rip open a bag of potato chips and eat all of them. It was inhumanly possible to eat this much food. And it feels real, and it tastes real. I mean, these chips were crunchy and delicious, but they would sort of end. I mean, you could not fill yourself up. The food would sort of disappear right around your neck, kind of. That's how I perceived it. And I would just eat as much chicken as I could, or brownies, or whatever I could think of, candy, and a lot of it. And it uncontrollably. So I went through that for some time and never could quite appease my appetite, but at some point just it stopped happening. I sort of got through it. And another real powerful thing that I had to get through was lust. And this is a bit embarrassing, so I won't get too into it. But I would become overcome with feelings of lustful, sexual energy. This is definitely a big thing with astral travel. Many astral travelers will talk about this. Robert Monroe went into some depth with this, and he said he would always just avoid, having sex on the other side and move on. I wasn't able to do that, so I just kind of go in and partake. And it's all kinds of fun. Yeah, I actually really enjoyed it. But at some point that stopped too. It sort of became less interesting than the other things you can do. Because there are all kinds of really cool experiments you can do when you're out of body. It's not just flying and walking through walls and exploring the physical world or the moon or what have you. You will pop over to the other side at some point, because again, that's the natural habitat for your astral body. And I started doing all these experiments. I would try to get to the other side. I wanted to meet my mother. So I'd often call for her, and she would never come. Occasionally she would just appear, and I would see her, but usually no. She was not there. And neither were my spirit guides. Most of the books that I'd read, the astral travelers, like Robert Monroe and others, had spirit guides which led them all over the place. I did not perceive any. So that was a little puzzling to me. And I put that on my bucket list. But one time I popped over to, this sort of Locale 2, this lower astral plane, and I found myself in a field, and I popped down, and there was a bull, an astral bull. And it freaked me out because this was a very large animal, and it looked quite threatening. And no sooner had I landed in this field when this bull charged me and pinned me to the ground. And it was actually pretty scary, but I confronted this as a hostile entity, which is what I guess you're supposed to do. And I said, nice bull, nice bull. And it disappeared, and I found myself out of body back at my father's house, where I first became lucid. Often when I'd be out of body, I would pop over there, and that's where I would find myself. And so I was pretty happy. Started singing. I manifested a box of chocolate candies, and I ate the whole box, and then I woke up. So weird things happen. I'm a huge... I've got a huge interest in disasters and shipwrecks, so I decided I was going to go visit the wreck of the Titanic, or the actual incident, if I could, go back in time and see it, because I've heard of other people doing this sort of thing. And so I popped out of my body, and I'm flying along in this very cloudy place, which is sort of what I often see when I'm trying to get to the other side. And I felt like this tiny speck with these vast clouds below me, and it's taken a real long time, even though I feel like I'm booking it at hundreds of miles per hour. And I can feel my consciousness beginning to slip away. I know I have only a few minutes left, and I was getting very curious as to what was below me underneath these clouds. So I finally just dived through the cloud layer, and I came out into a field filled with prehistoric-looking plants and ferns. There was lots of water, fields of dry grass. And I came in for a landing, and I'm looking around trying to identify where I might be or when. And the first thing I noticed was there was a lioness just about 20 feet away from me. And she was in this pounced position, like ready to pounce. And I barely saw her because she blended perfectly with the dry grass. And I was about to fly away because this was alarming. Even though I know I'm out of body and I can't be hurt, I still don't want to be eaten by a lion. But I wasn't fast enough. This lion pounced, and its jaws wrapped around my neck, and I felt it sort of biting my head off. And that wasn't enough for me to leave. That was pretty frightening. I now wonder if this is perhaps a past life, because this sort of thing starts to come up when you do out-of-body exploring. And in fact, I started going to a lot of past lives. And what I found was you're often taken to the death scene, or the most traumatic emotional incident in that lifetime, which is often the death scene. Not always. There was one time I called for a past life. I was out of body, and I said, okay, take me to see a past life. and suddenly this scene came roaring at me, and I was inside of it, and I was a woman who was about to be raped and murdered. I remembered it, and I didn't want this to happen because I remembered it and I didn't want to go through it again. So I do what I always do when I want to get back to my body, which is wiggle my fingers and toes, move my hands and open and close my eyes, blinking furiously, and that drew me right back. But yeah, I've recalled a number of past lives. Once I was killed in the Holocaust. I was put on a bus, ran to a pit, and shot in the back of the head and fell into the pit. And another time I was in Civil War times. I was a young black boy who had done something wrong or escaped and was locked up in this southern mansion. I'll never forget the feeling of looking at how rich it was inside this house. Because where I lived was not like that, I can tell you that. It was very poor, just a shanty. And inside this house there was lots of leathers and shiny woodwork and plush carpets. And I was locked in this room, and I decided to test the door to see if it was locked or not, and it was unlocked. And so I opened it, and I'm creeping through this house, and I see the front door, and I'm about to make a beeline for the front door and get out of there when I see this old woman in a rocking chair looking at me. And I thought, shoot, I'm caught. I am dead. And she looked up at me, she saw me, she smiled, and pointed to the front door and motioned for me to go. So I will always love this little old lady, this white woman, who let me go free. And I ran through the door, and I ran, and I found my family. I found my big black mama and my brothers and sisters. I was the oldest in that lifetime, that incarnation. So this sort of thing happens quite a bit. It's really cool. You get to explore your past lives. I was a soldier on a ship that sank. I had another lifetime where I was a Native American in the Wild West, I guess you would call it. And boy, I was just a little kid, and they treated us like dogs, the white men. They looked down on us as if we were animals. But what I remembered in that lifetime was meeting my scout, I guess, or my teacher. And he took me on a spirit quest with 2 other young kids. We were all about 9 years old. And we had to perform all these tasks, such as tracking him. And we had this sort of rucksack, or this backpack we filled with stones. And we had to climb a cliff and make it to the top. And I was the last to do it, but I did it, and I was so, so happy. And I will never forget this man who taught us how to do this Native American. I love him, and I always will. So yeah, the past life exploring is all kinds of fun. Another thing you can do, I read, is if you say your name when you're out of body, something really strange is supposed to happen. I thought, okay, well, this should be interesting. And I said my own name and nothing happened. And I did it a few times and nothing happened. And finally, one time I did it again. And it was really cool. The whole earth around me started shaking. I was projected upwards into the sky. All these firecrackers and skyrockets started exploding all around me. I felt like I was in a snow globe filled with these really pretty golden flakes. It's really cool. So yeah, that was fun. You can do all kinds of really interesting things. You can practice creating objects, build forests and mountains, homes. One way to sort of build control is to create a radio or a TV set. And you turn it on and you adjust the channels and you watch TV, your own out-of-body television. So I did that, and that took a while to learn how to control, but I did it. Once I turned on the radio and tried to make some songs play, and I was able to hear Jim Croce moving on down the road, Cher, The song was, Do You Believe in Life After Love? And then I changed the station to the Eagles, and it was Fly Like an Eagle. So there was kind of a message there in those songs, I think. It was really cool. Or I would create a typewriter, which kind of made me laugh because I do typing for a living. I did at that time. And the last thing I want to do is type when I'm not getting paid. But I was out of body, and yeah, I created this typewriter, and it feels absolutely real. Things feel 100% physical when you're on the other side. It feels absolutely real. In fact, it feels more than real. Colors are much more beautiful. One thing I heard was that if you stare at your body, it will disappear. It will fade away. I thought, no, that can't be true. But this is what Robert Bruce said. He's a pretty well-known astral traveler. He says, just lift your hands up and stare at them, and they will fade away. And so I did. I lifted my hands up and I examined them. And they were much younger than normal. They were blemish-free. And slowly they faded away, and I became this little tiny ball of light. Sometimes I would create a mirror and look at myself, and I saw that all my hair had come back. By age 25 or 30, I had pretty much lost most of my hair. Not when I'm out of body. My hair comes back to its full length. And yeah, it's great. I'm muscular, I'm buff, I'm young. It's amazing. It's really cool. Sometimes I would say, just shout out, take me where you think I need to go. And that was always interesting and unexpected. One time when I did that, I was pulled out of the physical world into what I presume to be the astral planes, into an astral forest. Felt like a rainforest, and there was this beautiful blue stream, and it was just filled with life energy and very healing. So that was fun. And I started to wonder about spirit guides as well. So I would call out to meet my spirit guides. And the results were always kind of strange and confusing to me. One time I called out, take me to my spirit guide. And I was plopped into this hallway. And there was a doorway at the end. I whipped open the door, and there was my brother Mark and my sister-in-law, Christine. And the room was filled with all kinds of cool stuff, bottles and books and just neat stuff. And I ran up to them and I laughed. I'm like, did you guys know you're my spirit guides? And they seemed as amused as I was. I did the same experiment, and the same thing happened. There was a hallway. I whipped open the door. And there was a young woman there looking at me mischievously with a smile on her face. And at that time I was actually trying to reach my higher self. And I looked at her, I'm like, are you my higher self? And she didn't answer. One time I called out to meet God. Like, I want to see God. I was popped out of body. I was in my living room. And I said, I want to meet God. And this very powerful force pulled me right up through the roof. It was so powerful I was knocked unconscious, and I woke up a short time later in the best mood I've ever been in. I felt so good. I should have tried to levitate. I probably could have. I felt great. So yeah, there's all kinds of really cool experiments you can do. I'd heard about near-death experiencers going down this tunnel and basking in the light. And I wanted to do that. And sure enough, I went through this tunnel and came out, and there was this huge, bright, all-loving, all-knowing light. And I went towards it. I didn't get to go very deep inside of it, but I sort of did. And I got to the edge of it, and I was just soaking it in, and it was awesome. You get a real feeling of peace and love and all-knowingness. And I could have stayed there forever, but I didn't. I got pulled back into my body. Another thing I heard about was the Akashic Library. And this is supposedly quite high up on the higher astral planes. And what I found out is it's quite complicated. You have your physical body, your etheric body, which is your aura, your astral body, or the desire body, and it goes up from there. You have your mental body, your causal body, your Akashic body, your Buddhic body, your Atmic body. These are all sort of different levels that you can go to. And Akashic, I knew, was pretty high up there. The Akashic Library is supposedly where all your lifetimes are recorded. Every action in the universe is recorded in this huge library. And I wanted to do it. I've read of other people who've done this, and I thought if they can do it, so can I. And I called out to go to the Akashic Library, and I hit this black barrier, this huge, giant black wall, which I couldn't get through. And I pounded and pounded against it and scratched and sort of dug into it, and finally I pried open this tiny little pinprick of a hole, and this divine white light shone down on me, and I sort of made the opening bigger, and I squeezed through, and I popped out into this very high vibrating realm. And it was really cool because I could feel anything that was bad in me, any guilt or greed or sadness or anger or any negative emotion was completely filtered out. I was left like pure and clean. And it was amazing. I saw my mom there, actually. This is a later experience. So that was really cool. That was the first time I didn't feel so worthy, and I sort of immediately went back. But I went back again and did it again. Same sort of thing. I had to scratch through this barrier, and I popped into this higher realm, which is absolutely beautiful. It's very pastoral, lots of nature. And I looked over ahead of me, and there was this beautiful sort of lake, sparkling like diamonds, and a huge building beyond it with pillars. And it was gorgeous. It looked kind of like Roman architecture, big, big, tall pillars, like the Capitol building. And there was a little bridge, and I kind of flew. My mom was there. I'm like, can you come with me? And she said, no, you have to go alone. And so I flew towards it and was really entranced by these pillars, which looked like rose quartz. They're huge, and they sparkle with this unbelievable light, this sort of inner light. I got pulled inside pretty quickly down this corridor, which was quite wide, and there were open doorways. I did perceive that there was someone guiding me, but I couldn't see them. And I was pulled into this room that was pretty small, your average sort of living room. It was perfectly square. It had what looked like windows or mirrors or screens on the various walls, on 3 walls. And I was looking at them, and I focused on one, and images started to appear. And it was a person. It was a man, and then a woman, and then another man, and then another man, and then a woman. And images of different people started flashing by at very high speed, sort of like you're flipping a deck of cards. And I knew instantly what I was looking at were my past lives. And although I couldn't really focus on who these people were, the message was that you have a lot of these past lives. And it was really amazing, really cool. And I'm just watching them whiz by, just completely humbled and amazed, when suddenly it stops on one of them, and it's this beautiful man with sort of silvery gray eyes. He's very handsome, bald, wearing sort of a robe. And I had the immediate sense that this was me in a future life. This was me fully enlightened. And he sort of stepped out of this screen and stood before me. And that was about all I could handle. I was overcome with emotion. I remember falling to my knees and kind of looking up at him in a just absolute humbled and amazed. And wow, I mean, it was just such a wow moment for me that I could barely handle it. And I couldn't handle it, actually. I got pulled back into my body. So that was one of the best experiences I've ever had. I did try to find my spirit guides often when I was exploring the physical world. I heard that your spirit guide is behind you, so if you turn around, you will see them. And so I would be flying around astrally, and I'd quickly turn around, and to my shock, there was a coyote. And I had a real distinct impression of a Native American spirit, and it would dart off, and I'd chase after it, and it would always elude me. I must have done that a half dozen times before it became sort of futile, and I stopped trying to figure out who this was. But yeah, I think we do all have spirit guides. So all kinds of really wonderful things you can do. But my whole real purpose was to try and meet my mother. And one day I popped out of my body, and I was in my living room trying to decide what to do when I saw that I wasn't alone. There was this beautiful black woman there, and she's very attractive. She had braids and dark skin and was dressed in a really nice dress. And I kind of quickly zoomed up to her and wanted to ask her who she was because she looked familiar to me. I was sure I knew her, but I could not place her. And she just grinned at me ear to ear, grabbed my shoulders, spun me around, and pushed me on my back through the wall. And I was very startled. I went right through my wall of my living room, and I popped out into another place. It was a very strange place. It looked Earth-like. Looked like an outdoor cafe, really, with big flagstones, little tables where people were sitting and talking. There was a little wrought iron fence surrounding this little courtyard. It was really pretty. I'm wondering, where is this? Is this France? What's going on? And I remembered my brother and sister were trying to buy a house, so I said, take me to their new house. And boom, I'm in front of coming down into this house. I remember it vividly. There was a cliff behind it, a red tile roof. So I explored that house for a while and finally came out the other side, turned around and memorized it. Never did see it again, but flew upwards, realized I wasn't breathing. I'm like, this is strange. I'm out of body. You don't need to breathe. This is very weird. And then I remembered I wanted to call for my mom. And so I shouted out, Mom, 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 where are you? Mom, I'm here. Come. And boom, she appeared. And this was the biggest reunion I've ever had with her. She looked totally beautiful. Ooh, a little ball of light just appeared there. She looked amazing. And she looked so young. I mean, she died when she was 49. She had gray hair, some wrinkles. But now she looked younger than me. She looked like she was about 18, 20 years old. Her hair, which had always been black in my memory, was now light brown. And she looked gorgeous. I'm like, Mom, you look beautiful. And she smiled and we hugged, and I tried not to completely lose my mind because this was the kind of reunion you just dream of in your greatest dreams. I had lost her tragically, and now she was there. And we hugged and hugged and hugged. I didn't want to let go. And finally she, we separated a little bit and we're holding hands, and I just stared at her. And she says, you haven't seen anything yet. Not in so many words, but sort of gave me that message and took me by the hand, and we flew towards the other side. And we popped out in this other area, which was very strange. It was this landscape filled with little dark stones for miles and miles around. She manifested a vehicle, an American luxury car. She sat in the driver's seat. I sat in the passenger seat. I laughed my butt off. I'm like, what's this? And she was laughing at my reaction. She said, just wait. I've got something to show you. Again, not in so many words, but just mentally. And we zoomed off in this car and hit another barrier. sort of the veil between the worlds, I guess, and we popped out into what I now know to be the heavenly realms. And I cannot describe to you how beautiful this area is. This is where we all go when we die. And it is a beautiful natural scene with forests and flowers and fields and rivers. And it's gorgeous. The grass is so green. The flowers glow with an inner light. Everything glows with light. There are no shadows here at all. Everything glows. And the air itself sparkles. The atmosphere hugs you and loves you. You could not be in a bad mood if you tried in this astral plane. And we came for a landing in this field, and I'm just looking at it, totally amazed. My mom is looking around and looking at me and enjoying my reaction. And I look at her, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And she takes my hand, and we fly over to the end of the field where there's a little stream, a little creek, and we land inside of it. She wanted to show me this. And I was amazed at the texture of the water because it was very cool, very wet. You could feel it, but it didn't get you wet in the same way water gets you wet here. Because as soon as you'd lift a hand or a leg out, you were dry again. And it felt really, just a really silky texture. And she's laughing at me as I'm sort of feeling the water, and she takes a piece of algae and throws it at me. Hits me square on the chest and face. I'm like, Mom! She was always a little bit mischievous, a little bit of a jokester. And she threw another piece at me. I'm like, okay, it's war. And I scooped down, grabbed some algae, and I threw it at her. And we had a little water fight for 3 to 5 minutes, just splashing around in the water. And it was all kinds of fun and really interesting because, yeah, as soon as you step out, and we did, we stepped out and went to the side, you're perfectly clean again. It just comes right off of you. You're not wet anymore. And she was dressed in a shirt and pants, and so was I. She never really was big on dresses. And I was just amazed. I'm like, wow, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. And she said, just wait, I've got more to show you. Again, not in words, but in just a mental impression. And she grabbed my hand, and we went flying upwards into a higher plane. And we hit another barrier. It's hard to describe, but it's sort of like hitting a curtain or hitting like the surface of a pool and diving into it. But it's or a higher energetic sheet. And we popped through it, and I couldn't believe my eyes. This was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It was this vast field of quartz crystals is what it looked like. Some of these crystals were quite large, the big of a house. Some were small like a boulder. Some were rock-sized. Some were like fine sand. Some of these were translucent, perfectly clear. Others were sort of opaque. Some were shining light. Others were sort of just reflecting light. But it was absolutely gorgeous. I have never seen anything so beautiful ever. And I just couldn't believe my eyes. I had no idea that anything this beautiful could exist, or that there was a place like this. I was dumbfounded. And my mom thought this was very amusing because I kept just shaking my head with complete awe. And what was really interesting is my vision changed. I am slightly nearsighted, but you can see absolutely perfectly on the other side, or even the second you pop out of body, your vision is absolutely crisp and clear. But it was even more so here. You could see the kind of detail you cannot see here on Earth. There's much more detail. And not only that, you have 360-degree vision, panoramic vision, which was really disorienting to sort of see everything all at once. And it's made me a little bit dizzy at first until I started to get used to it. And another thing I noticed was you could look off into the distance and you could zoom forward and see it in great detail. So I started playing with that, looking at, you know, a ridge that must have been, I don't know, a mile, 2 miles away, and zooming in and just examining these crystals. And it was just white crystals in all directions. It was really, really pretty. And finally, I looked back at my mom. She's sitting up on one of these very large crystals. She's got a really good posture. She always did. She's just looking at me very patiently, grinning ear to ear, smiling at my obvious awe and enjoyment of this place. And I'm looking at her thinking, you know, thank you. Oh my God, this is amazing. Wow. And she points to the ground. And she says, look at the ground. And I did. And she did this little trick. She turned it bright orange. It was brightest orange in the center and sort of faded as you're going outwards to about a 3-foot circle that was just bright, bright orange. I'm like, wow, that's a cool trick. And she says, go ahead and pick some of this stuff up and eat it. Put it in your mouth and eat it. I'm like, what? She said, go ahead. She motioned. Pick it up. It was like sand. Pick it up and put it in your mouth. I'm like, okay, you're the boss. So I bent down and I scooped some of this stuff up. I could feel it. It's like fine sand. And I put it in my mouth. And wow, it was amazing. It exploded with orange flavor. Not really orange candy or orange juice, but that flavor, I mean, it was twice the flavor of orange juice. It was so orange, I couldn't believe it. And it's just exploding with flavor and crackling and popping and swirling around in my mouth. It was the most amazing taste sensation I have ever had in my entire life. And she loved my reaction. I was totally awestruck, and she laughed, and I'm like, wow, that was amazing. And then she took my hand, and we flew back to the pastoral realm, the heavenly realms, and we sat down on this little bench. There's these pathways and benches and flowering trees and grasses. There's other people walking along, and singly or couples or small groups. Everyone's really nice. Everyone's really happy. And we just sat there and talked for a little while. I forgot much of this conversation, unfortunately. But what I do remember is it soon became time to go. And she pointed up at the sky, and it was filled with these white fluffy clouds. It's really one of the few times I've actually seen sky. Blue sky. It's usually kind of whitish and just really, really bright. I never have seen night on the heavenly realms. And she pointed to the sky and spelled out in fluffy white clouds, I love you, I love you, I love you. And I'm like, wow, I love you too. And I started to feel this force pulling on my body. I could kind of sense this tunnel opening up behind me. It was my time to go. I had to go. I didn't want to, but it was clear that I had to leave. And next thing I knew, I'm hurtling down this tunnel like people in near-death experiences describe. And I popped out in this lower realm. I manifested a dream journal, and I wrote everything down. And I had to pop down several levels and kept manifesting a dream journal, not my real dream journal, but a dream journal, because I had to sort of step down this memory, because this is a rather high astral plane, which took me a while to get to. But after that one experience, I've been back many, many times, and it's awesome. Every time I'm there, all my memories come flooding back. I go there, regularly, practically nightly. I think we all do, actually. And when I'm there, all my memories come back. I remember everything. I wonder how I could have ever thought my mom was dead, because she's not. And I even get to the point where I forget the physical world. I am living there. And then suddenly I am pulled back, and I am plopped back in my body. And then I remember, oh shoot, I'm actually living on Earth, not there, and much of the memory leaves me. I'm never able to take back all these memories. I just remember remembering. But I keep going back. I still go back. And I see a lot of people there too, including my family members who are alive. And it's very strange because I finally became really curious about this. And I walked up to my brother Stephen. I'm like, do you know that you're out of body? And he says, oh yeah, I know. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, you're having an out of body experience. Are you going to remember this? He says, no, I won't remember. I said, well, how could you not remember if you're conscious here? He says, I don't know, I just won't remember. I'm like, why don't you try to remember? He says, I won't remember. And we had a little bit of an argument about this. I'm like, well, try to remember. And he says, I can't, I won't, I'm not going to remember, so stop trying to ask me. And I sort of gave up and called him up the next morning. Of course, he did not remember. And I tried the same with my sister, Victoria. I'm like, another time I saw her there. I'm like, Victoria, you realize we're on the other side? And she's like, yeah, we're in the in-between place, is what she said. I'm like, oh, okay, that's an interesting way of putting it. And I'm like, do you think you'll remember? And she says, no, I'm not able to remember. I'm like, but how can you say that? How can you say you're not going to remember if you're talking to me right now while we're here? She says, I just don't have the ability. I'm sorry. And I'm like, well, I'm going to remember. If I can remember, you can remember. And she says, well, I'll try, but I won't. And I'm like, how about I try and help you? And so I manifested a UFO. I created a UFO. By just thinking, you can create anything on the other side. So I made a UFO, and it was a good one. It was this huge silver saucer with colored lights. She looked at it and went, wow. And so did I. It was amazing. It looked like this UFO. And I said, do you think you'll remember that? And she said she might. And we went, I went back to my body and I called her up and she had no memory of it whatsoever. So I've tried to do this and have never succeeded in getting any of my other family members to remember. So that's quite frustrating. But at one point, our dog Maxine passed away. And I thought, well, I'd like to go see her. And I popped out on the other side in these astral realms, and she came running up to me. She's a very reserved dog. And was pretty old when she died, hobbling around. And she had all her vitality back. And she ran up and she licked me on the face, which was something she would never do. She only licked you if she was in a really good mood. And you had to really convince her and to give me your paw or, lick me. And she came zooming up and licked me. And I saw our other dog, Clyde. And he also was really young and vital, and it's amazing. So I would visit them regularly. And the last time I visited Maxine, she came running up to me, looked up at me and said, hi, Preston. And that knocked me over. She talked to me in English. I laughed really hard. I did not know this was a thing. I've since found out that, your pets begin to learn how to talk. So that's really cool. And I can tell you with complete confidence that you will meet your loved ones who have passed away on the other side. It's really amazing. One time I popped out on the other side and there was a family friend, Rex, a black man, who was somewhat ill, would cough a lot and, this sort of thing. And didn't have great posture. But I looked at him, he was standing upright, he looked healthy and glowing so brightly. His skin, which was really quite dark, looked almost white. And I'm like, Rex, what are you doing here? And he looked very bewildered, really confused, didn't seem to quite understand what was happening. And I just looked at him and sort of looked at him in amazement and said hi, and that was it. And came back to my body, and I thought, well, I guess I should call him. He's really my father's friend, not mine. I don't know him that well. But I didn't have to call him because we got a call that Rex had had a stroke, a severe stroke. And as far as I know, he doesn't remember having a near-death experience. But that taught me that even people who don't remember having a near-death experience probably do. So that was really cool. So you will meet your loved ones on the other side. And one more thing that I would like to mention is rescuing lost souls. This is something that's quite common with astral travelers. They will come upon people who are earthbound for whatever reason, whether they're drug addicts or had a traumatic death or are attached to their home. They remain earthbound. This is a huge problem. And I thought, gosh, I've never done that. I didn't think I had done that. It turned out I probably was doing it. Because here's what happened. I sort of popped out of my body and gave that command. I want to rescue a lost soul. And I found myself being taken to this home. And I was pulled down into the crawl space underneath the home. And there was a little girl there. A very sad, heartbroken, crying little girl. Blonde hair, blue eyes. She must have been about 6, 7 years old. And she was all curled up and crying. And broke my heart. I'm like, oh, honey, what's wrong? Are you okay? And she looked at me with sad eyes. And I said, would you like to fly? I can take you flying. Because this is something I would sometimes do. I would come upon people who I thought were on Earth, and I would take them and I'd fly them over to the other side. So I probably was rescuing lost souls, because this is something I'd done before without really realizing it. I would come upon people and I'd be like, you want to learn how to fly? I can show you. And I'd fly them over. And she looked at me and just kind of shook her head. She was really scared. I'm not sure she trusted me or who I was. She had no idea who I was. But I was determined to help her. And I was racking my brain on what to do. And I hit upon an idea. I said, okay, how would you like to see your mom? I can take you to your mom. And her eyes widened a little bit, and she didn't quite smile, but she sort of brightened up a little bit and nodded her head. I said, okay, I'll take you to your mom. Here, take my hand, and we'll go right now. And she took my hand, and we flew upwards real quickly, and I took her to the other side. I lost track of her as soon as we hit that area. I tried real hard to follow her, but apparently this is hard to do. I've read about this, that watch very carefully what happens, because they will probably disappear. And that's exactly what happened. Once we got to the other side, she was gone. So I thought, well, I did it. So that was good enough for me. And I've since had probably hundreds of out-of-body experiences. These experiences that I've talked about so far are from 1988 to about 2003. And I wrote these experiences down that I've presented here in my book, Out of Body Exploring, A Beginner's Approach. So if you want to learn more about these experiences, I would definitely recommend checking out this book, because I've had a lot of these experiences and I've kind of glossed over a lot of the details, because this is a long story. I mean, these are hundreds of out-of-body experiences I've had, thousands probably. And since then, I've gotten a lot better. I've really only touched the surface of the things you can do. I mean, I've never seen my silver cord prior to this. I did that. I went and visited enlightened masters. I visited healing temples on the other side. I was able to have shared out-of-body experiences with someone else who was really good at it. Boy, she took me on some incredible journeys into outer space and into the past, all kinds of stuff. I was also able to explore the physical world more. I went to Area 51. I went inside. I went inside the Malibu anomaly, this sort of undersea base off the coast of Malibu. I actually went and visited the hellish realms, the lower astral planes, which was really cool. Met all kinds of ghosts and stuff, and yeah, I have currently having all kinds of really amazing adventures, which I'm putting together in another book. So that's going to have to be a video for another time, but hopefully I'll get that one out soon enough. But all these other experiences that I've talked about are, again, in my book, Out-of-Body Exploring, A Beginner's Approach. And I cannot recommend trying this enough. It will absolutely change your life. It will wake you up psychically. You will start having all kinds of dreams which come true. Clairvoyance, past life recall, telepathy. I can't tell you how many dreams I've had which have come true, or just spontaneous visions. I'll just tell you one or two. One involved an earthquake. I woke up right before an earthquake occurred, and boom, it hit. And this sort of thing. A lot of dreams which come true. It's really quite a long story, but I really want everyone who hears this to at least give this a try. And if you think it's scary or dangerous, it's not. It's as safe as sleeping. And in fact, what I found is a number of cases where people have actually been healed. I've documented some 20 cases of people who have been healed of physical illness. Some of these serious and chronic illnesses, others minor. But yeah, it's a very healing experience. The only real obstacle is laziness, skepticism, and fear. So if you just take the time to do it, you can do it. If you believe you can do it, you can do it. And if you overcome your fear, it's quite easy. And the benefits are unbelievable. You basically just about double your lifespan, because all this time you're spending unconscious, or not remembering rather, because you are conscious on the other side, you can have access to that and basically have all these really wonderful experiences. You can live out any fantasy you want. It is absolutely amazing. The benefits are unbelievable. It completely erases your fear of death. So that alone is worth it. And there are no special qualifications. I've done this under the influence of alcohol. It's not as easy, but it can be done. And you don't have to fast or be a vegetarian or lose weight or be a monk or a priest or a yogi. Anyone can do this. Most people will have an out-of-body-like experience at least once in their lifetime. Flying dreams are really half-remembered out-of-body experiences. Many dreams are half-remembered out-of-body experiences. You won't become lost. You won't become possessed. You won't go too far away or anything like that, because you always get pulled back into your body by your silver cord. It's absolutely as safe as sleeping. And let me just tell you real quickly how to do it, because it's not hard. And there's quite a bit of literature out this. I've refined it into 3 or 4 simple steps. And the first step is physical relaxation. This is where a lot of people, I think, fall short, because it's difficult to relax. You want to relax to the point where you can't feel your body. This is best done at night as you're going to bed, or even better, early in the morning when you wake up. So if you allow an extra hour of sleep, that's a really good idea. And just relax your body to the point where you can't feel it, or you feel certain sensations like heaviness, or lightness, or numbness, or tingling, or vertigo. Ultimately, what you want to feel is a vibration, the vibratory state. And it can be mild, or it can be very powerful, like a jet engine roaring through you. So don't be alarmed if you feel a lot of power pulsing through your body. It's a really good sign that you're primed and ready to go out of body. So just relax, relax, relax. It sometimes takes me as long as 20 minutes. Other times I just plop down and whoosh, I'm out. But I think that will come with practice. The second step would be mentally relaxing. We have a sort of stream of consciousness that's constantly going through our heads. We are thinking, thinking, thinking on multiple levels. We're thinking of the songs that we heard. We're thinking of the movies we saw. We're thinking of the work we have to do. Everything that we have put off or procrastinated, we're thinking about that. The arguments we've had. All of this is flowing through your head on multiple levels. So you want to kind of just mentally relax, emotionally relax, center yourself, and watch your thoughts. Once you've physically relaxed, you turn your attention 180 degrees, ignore the environment, and look inward at your thoughts until they start to turn to images. You'll see colors and lights. You may hear voices. That's fine. It's a good sign. It means you're mentally relaxed and you're about to slip into the dream state if you're not careful. But don't do that. If you have to lay on your back or sit in an easy chair, whatever you have to do to not fall asleep, do that. And maintain your awareness. And the next step would be affirmations. And by that I mean you say to yourself, I am going out of body. I am out of body right now. I will remember everything that happens tonight. I remember everything. Take me out of body. Appeal to your spirit guides. So you really want to sort of affirm that you are going to go out of body. And you have to really focus on this. And by that I mean sort of wrap together your imagination, your intention, your willpower. Put it all together. Intend to do this. Want to do it. Desire it. Feel it. Use your willpower and really just focus on it. And affirm that you will go out of body and you will remember everything that happens. And then you do the last step, which is visualizations. Now that you're physically relaxed, you're mentally relaxed, and you've told you're focusing on wanting to do this, visualize yourself rolling out of bed. That works pretty well. Another one that works really well is visualizing yourself running as fast as you can. Just running. That will pull you right out of your body. Another would be visualize yourself on a swing set, going back and forth. Anything that involves movement will work. Visualize yourself spinning like Wonder Woman, just spinning in place. Visualize yourself on the bow of a ship going up and down in the waves. Visualize yourself on an escalator or an elevator. Visualize yourself holding onto a balloon and being pulled upwards. Visualize a rope hanging down from the ceiling and reaching out and grabbing it and pulling yourself up. I've done all of these methods and all of them work. And there are other methods. One way is to visualize yourself standing in another place, perhaps a natural garden that you love, a room you know really well, another place that's not your bedroom, your living room, a friend's house, any other place, and suddenly it will coalesce around you and you will find yourself in it. Another really good method, if you're having trouble with this, is to focus on a deceased loved one. I call this the love bridge. Just call out to a person who you love or know who has died, who is on the other side. And imagine what they look like, what they sound like, what it feels like to hug them. Call out to them. Ask them to help you. And they will come and take you to the other side. This has worked for me a number of times. Call out to your spirit guides. We all have them. We all have people on the other side who love us dearly and are working very hard to raise our awareness. This is how synchronicities and coincidences happen. And they are there for you. So absolutely try that. Another thing that's really important to do is keep a dream journal. Out-of-body experiences are very closely related to dreams. Many dreams are out-of-body experiences, so you really want to focus on remembering what happens to you at night. Each morning, don't move. Just lay there and remember your dreams. You want to get to the point where you're remembering 3 or 4 dreams per night. And that's when you'll start to have lucid dreams. That's when you'll start to have precognitive dreams. That's when you start having real dreams. The purpose of dreaming will become apparent to you, because you will wake up and become lucid in the dream state. And now I just want to give you one last instruction, and this is the real clue on how to have out-of-body experiences, and I guarantee it will work if you do it. This is a guaranteed method, and all you have to do is try it, and it will work. And this is called reality testing, critical thinking. Throughout the day, you want to look around you and see if there are any anomalies, anything that doesn't look quite right. Almost every dream you will have some sort of anomaly to it. Your driveway will be facing the wrong direction. The color of your carpet is wrong. The couch that you used to have is now there in your living room. There's a window where there isn't one. Some anomaly, something that's just different and not right. The paint color is wrong. The kitchen is too big. It could be anything. And each dream has this. And this is designed by your higher self to wake you up, to make you question reality and see if you are dreaming or out of body. So you want to start doing this during the day. At least 3 times a day, preferably much more. 10 times a day would be ideal. Make it a routine. Anytime before you eat, anytime you go to the bathroom, anytime you do any chore, spend 30 seconds doing this, looking around and seeing if there are any anomalies. It will feel ridiculous at first because you know you're awake when you're awake. But this is the problem. When you are out of body, everything is so real, so vivid, it never occurs to you that you could possibly be out of body. And you are. So you really have to start questioning reality and looking around and asking yourself, is it at all possible I am dreaming? Is it at all possible I am out of body? And if there's even the slightest doubt, the slightest, you are out of body. And one way to test this, if you don't see any anomalies, is to jump up and see if you levitate. It's going to feel a little ridiculous, but try it. Just jump up. And if you're not in a place where you can do that, take an object like a pen and drop it. And it will float. Normally, it will just drop. It might kind of go down really slowly. But if you're on the other side, it will float. It can be any object, a little tennis ball, an eraser. It doesn't matter. Just try to lift something up and drop it and see what happens. Another thing you can do is try to push your finger through your desk or perhaps the wall. Just push your finger through the wall and see what happens. If your finger doesn't go through the wall, that means you are awake in the physical plane. But if it does, boy, you're going to get a shock because at one point it will. So if you do this 10 times every day while you're awake, what will happen is you have developed a routine and you will continue this behavior in the out-of-body state, in the dream state. And what will happen is you'll be at work or something at the office or doing your chores, cleaning your house, or whatever it is you do during the day. And you'll be like, okay, I'm going to do this ridiculous exercise and jump up. And to your shock, you will levitate. Or whatever object you throw up into the air will float. Or you'll suddenly push your finger right through the wall. And it will be an incredible revelation. It will be a mini enlightenment. And suddenly everything will just fade away. And you will realize that you were actually dreaming or out of body. And often you'll find that you're floating above your body, right above your bed, in your room. Or you might be completely on the other side, because we all go to the heavenly realms, as near as I can tell, on a nightly basis. So this is the ultimate exercise that will work. It's guaranteed, but you do have to do it. You absolutely have to try this. And 3 times a day is probably sufficient, but it will work much more quickly if you do it 10 times a day. And that is the real key to learning how to go out of body. And from there, you can learn how to move, how to see, and start doing all kinds of wonderful experiments and visit your deceased loved ones. Go to healing temples. Learn about your spirit guides, your past lives. Heal yourself of physical illness. The things you can do is absolutely amazing. And that's why I wanted to do this video, because it completely transformed my life. I absolutely love this. It's something I will never give up because it's truly enriched my life to an unbelievable degree, and I cannot recommend it enough. I really, really hope that you guys at least try doing this, and I guarantee it will change your life for the better. And that's why I wanted to do this video, because it's like discovering a whole new world, and I guarantee you will love it. You can thank me later. But that's it for now. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Thanks once again for listening. I really appreciate it. Until next time, keep having fun.